right. Hello, Sammy Rae. Good afternoon. First off, how are you?
I'm well, thanks. I'm in Athens, Georgia. We're getting into the fifth show of this tour and feeling ready to go and excited for a good show tonight.
Awesome. We love to hear that. Thanks again for being here. As you said, you're in the middle of a tour, just under a weekend, so we really appreciate you taking your time to talk to us today.
Of course.
So first question, you started performing music when you were a teenager, and you've described your music from that time as pop-oriented, upbeat, theatrical. But then when you moved to New York after graduating high school, you got some gigs singing jazz standards. And to me, your voice feels so naturally suited for the sort of vocal jazz style. And I'm wondering if that's something that came naturally or if it took some time to transition from that pop, upbeat stuff that you sang in high school.
I think it's a little bit of both. It came naturally, and it also did take a second. When I was first starting to write, I was a young teenager, and number one, didn't have a great deal of things to be inspired by. I, was young. But I was also, a novice in teaching myself how to play piano, teaching myself how to play ukulele. And so I was writing definitely simpler things. But as I met musicians and kind of developed my own preferences after a while, I just fell in love with like the great female jazz vocalists of just like the pioneers of female jazz, like Ella Fitzgerald and Sarah Vaughan and Etta James and all them. And it wasn't until I was about maybe 18 that I started listening to that and just sort of adopting that sort of sound. You don't really know what your sound is when you're 14, but once I'd kind of really like actually matured into my own actual like vocal cords and become an adult and started listening to jazz music, I just kind of leaned that way, and still with a little bit of the folk and the classic rock that I grew up with.
Those vocal jazz gigs, did they just sort of come for you, or did you start deciding, I'm going to present myself as a jazz vocalist and really like push that image of yourself?
It's so bizarre how this happened. I was waiting tables when I first got to New York trying to make some money, and I was like singing around the restaurant one day, and I was serving a customer who I was just kind of like humming and singing along, and a customer said, I used to work at the Cotton Club. I would love to get you an audition. And I was like, well. And then suddenly I was auditioning for the owner of the Cotton Club, and I had a like 3 songs a night thing going on at what's the jazz club that's now the Cotton Club. And from there, I just met a lot of people in that industry and started getting like restaurant gigs and private events and things like that. And I kind of found myself in that circuit, and that was a good kind of intro to being on stage and making live music before I started to, write for my own band.
What do you think of that audition?
I sang All of Me, and I sang, I don't remember. I sang All of Me, and I might have sang I've Got My Love to Keep Me Warm. And I think I also sang Misty.
Okay, classic.
Yeah, it was a couple. Yeah, I sang 3 or 4.
Awesome. So moving on to the next question. In the previous interview, you kind of described when you were writing The Good Life as you would just hear the various instrumental parts in your head, and then you'd find musicians in New York and connect with them to play those parts. And this is kind of going to you finding your sound, as an adult. But what was the process of finding both, I guess, your sound, but also like the sound of the Friends?
I mean, when we first started all this, I was just hiring the people that I knew. I knew very few musicians, and over time, just going to open mics and jazz clubs and seeing other sets. I had seen a bunch of musicians I really liked, and I would kind of ask them to coffee and be like, hey, I've got a band, you want to try to play with me? And sometimes, or I'm putting together a band, and sometimes they would stick, and sometimes it wasn't the right vibe, and sometimes we would jam, and it would make sense. And, over the course of those couple of months, I put together the band that was the Good Life EP in the studio. And virtually, actually only 2 members of the current band, the band that we've been for several years, only JQ and Seabass on drums and bass were on that record. So definitely in the process of recording The Good Life, those were those songs. But as the steady kind of long-term band came in, obviously they had their own little flair and things changed a little bit. But it's very close to what I originally wanted, which was just a large band of individually talented musicians who worked really well together and were willing to collaborate and incorporate all their senses of style and music together into one sort of thing. And of course, I didn't know what that hodgepodge was going to look like, but it looks like the Friends now. And I'm very grateful with the way that things shook out and how we've ended up in the lineup that we're in, and also sort of the style that we've adopted.
So I guess the transition from you had like some strength on The Good Life, was that transition kind of like determined by personnel?
Well, I mean, I wanted to rock a little bit harder than what we did on The Good Life, and a big part of that was losing one trumpet and adding another saxophone. That was an arrangement thing. I wanted a second saxophone.
Sure.
But it's definitely a personnel thing too, you know, certain people just kind of stuck and the band just formed around them. For instance, like Will Wheat was originally our keys player and we had a different guitarist. But then when that guitarist left the project, Will stepped in as lead guitarist. He was playing guitar and keys. And then when Debbie Chong showed up, she took over keys. The heart of the songs has always been there. The bulk of the arrangements always been there, but they definitely have changed as personnel has come in. A little bit of both, I think.
Sure. Did you meet all of like the band members, the friends in New York while you were there, like at the various jazz clubs, or did you know some of them beforehand?
No, I met everybody in New York.
Oh, that's awesome. So going back to The Good Life, it kind of blew up overnight after being released for I think only a couple months. And suddenly you described like having to make more music and playing live. Now I'm wondering what that transition was like.
I mean, it was wild. I had to learn how to be on stage and with a very large band at that, kind of all at once. Which is something I had very little experience, if not no experience in. But yeah, I mean, it just kind of boomed, and suddenly we were playing all kinds of gigs left and right in New York, and we realized that it was time for us to travel, but we didn't really have any funds yet to travel out of New York, which was an interesting time period. So we were just trying to play New York rooms as fast as we could, and we were like selling out 100, and then we would book a 200 and sell that out, and then we booked a 500 and sold that out. So it was really special to, even though there were so many of us and we couldn't travel quite as much as we wanted to, it was nice to kind of watch our growth in the New York City scene happen really organically and learn together as we were going, because none of us were accustomed to being, I don't know, I guess not famous, but none of us were accustomed to being, you know, popular for being ourselves. Suddenly everybody didn't just know my name and then Max's name and James's name, which is really wonderful and is a learning experience that we're still all going through together.
Sure. Did you face, I guess, a challenge then deciding whether or not to play as many New York City rooms as possible or to focus on writing?
No, it was pretty straightforward. I mean, we needed to play. We were a new band. There was demand. We were selling tickets. We didn't know how long that was going to last. And we needed to play as many live shows and sell as many tickets and grow this thing organically as we could. So we definitely tried, you know, hit really hard with live shows in New York and a couple of surrounding like tri-state area shows. Mm-hmm. And then suddenly COVID happened and kind of stopped everything in its tracks, and then we were able to start touring again, gratefully.
Yeah, Let's Throw a Party, was that written all during COVID?
Just about, yeah, pretty much. It was all recorded during COVID for sure. There were a couple songs that had existed kind of before we went into lockdown, and we didn't know, you know, what we were going to do with them, if anything. But yeah, pretty much all of that came during COVID.
How much of a headache was it trying to maintain the sort of synergy that you have when everyone's recording in their own little bubbles?
Well, it was tough because we had to do so much of it virtually. Like we really had to like send each other tracks and what do you think of this and what do you think of that, and do a lot of it virtually, which was interesting and brand new for us, but I think we got the hang of it pretty quickly. And when it finally was time to go into the studio, we felt very much prepared, and I'm happy with how that all turned out.
So right now, as I said earlier, you're a few days into this massive tour. New cities, new songs, new continents. I believe this is the first time the Friends are playing in the UK. Is that correct?
Yes, I'm very excited about that.
So exciting. But how has the tour been so far? And how do you prepare for such a busy tour? I imagine there's a lot, both technically, logistically, emotionally. Like what's your process?
I mean, it's been a great tour so far. We've really been amazed by the audience response and very grateful for it. And I mean, you just prepare with thinking about as much as you can ahead of time, and then meditating on the fact that all kinds of stuff is going to show up that you weren't ready for, and just kind of be willing to commit to it and take it as a see what you get. So felt very prepared for this one. It wasn't our first long form bus tour, so it was nice to know what we were walking into a little bit.
Gotcha. Now I did hear that your bus had some issues earlier this week, and I guess I'm wondering, was that the worst you've ever faced on tour, or has there been much worse?
Oh no, we've had a we've been in a Sprinter van and have that break down in the middle of the highway and not know how we're getting to the next gig and have to cancel it. I think all bands go through some version of that, but everybody was a real team player this week and stepped it up, and we were able to get to the gig on time, which is what matters more than anything, right?
Yes. And I'm sure like it also builds camaraderie. This past summer, you had a very jam-packed festival season while also releasing 2 new singles and a music video. How did you balance such a busy schedule of all that while also maintaining an internet presence, all without burning out?
I mean, you just kind of figure it out. I was very interested in doing as many things as we could to push the tour that was coming up forward, and I think that's what we did. I'm grateful for it, and it was a very fulfilling time period. Of course, I love the music video, and I love the singles that we were able to release. So very jam-packed. We played a lot of festivals, got to know a lot of new people. So I think we also laid some important groundwork for building our audience for sure.
Oh, definitely. What was the timeline like between the 2 singles, music video, and also festivals, and preparing for this upcoming tour?
I mean, festivals was a lot of flying around. We were flying just about everywhere. So I was kind of writing scripts and figuring things out on planes. I don't know what to say. It kind of all happened at the same time. And whenever we were not traveling, we were in New York rehearsing for, or being in the studio making the new singles. It was really just we were kind of almost had this athlete mentality of like, this summer is crazy, but it's important work to be done. We got to do it. And we did it. And I was it was a very special and affirming time period for us because we had so many things to do and we handled all of them with a lot of grace. So I'm grateful.
No, I agree. And especially I think the fan response has been great. I want to hear, because I don't think I've ever heard online, like the full process, start to finish for a Friends tune.
Yeah, I mean, I'll write something on one of my instruments and come up with some of the horn lines for what it's all going to look like and then take it into the band, and they'll help me discover like the groove between the percussion and the bass, and we change up some chords sometimes, but it's hugely collaborative outside of kind of the lyrics and the main melody that I'm writing. It's an enormously collaborative process. And
then what about for covers?
I mean, James Quinlan, our music director, is a huge part of helping get covers together. But for the most part, usually I pick the song and then we all kind of build it together. Again, I mean, it's all pretty collaborative, you know,
Gotcha.
So it's kind of all of us doing the same thing and giving each other feedback as we go.
Awesome. So between the fun lyric and Jackie O, quote, "I got us a great part in the spring play after all," end quote. And then like also the Let's Throw a Party music video, which takes place entirely on stage at the Performing Arts Center. I'm wondering, were you a theater kid? And how has that kind of influenced your work with the Friends? Because it feels very theatrical.
Totally. I mean, I was a theater kid all from the time I was 7 up through my college years. And I'm grateful for that. It's really definitely increased my feeling comfortable on stage and hopefully my showmanship. And there's definitely an element of theater to our show. We're very set-oriented, costume-oriented. We're interested in putting on an entire production top to bottom. So it definitely plays a huge part in every aspect of what I'm inspired by.
Yeah, that makes sense. I have to ask, what was that great part in the spring play?
I don't even really know if I was thinking of a role in particular. I guess I was Cinderella into the Woods. I was probably talking. Maybe my favorite role I ever had ever. Totally.
Yeah, are you a big Sondheim person? I could see that.
Oh my God, absolutely. I mean, I'm a singer. You know, and he writes such wonderful parts for sang. They're really difficult and they're a beautiful challenge, and I've always enjoyed singing his stuff. Always.
Yeah, no, I hear you. Going back to the Friends a little bit, was there any one moment where either you realized you had made it, like, properly, or you were like, I don't know if we're going to make it, I don't think we're, you know, some moment of desperation? Was there any, like, either end of the spectrum?
I mean, I'm grateful to say it's been pretty steady progress this entire time. I remember being really impressed at Le Poisson Rouge. We played LPR in New York, which was a big moment for all of us. It was a venue we all knew and loved. It's kind of the venue that you play when you make it, I guess, at least from that tier of where we were playing. And not only did we play it, but we sold it out, which was amazing. So yeah, it was a huge bonding moment for all of us. We're like, oh my God, we're playing this thing that we've seen so many bands we love in this venue. We're not only playing it, we sold it out, which was, I mean, that's the one I usually point to. And then suddenly there was all this demand to tour, and the next thing we knew, we were selling out rooms that weren't just in New York.
Yeah, and there you have it. It definitely is impressive, I think, the trajectory of your band. even though, what are you, like 4 years old, the band? 2018 is when A Good Life came out. Yeah, you guys have just consistently grown and survived the pandemic. And came out stronger, I think, on the other end.
So do I, which we're grateful to say. Not all bands can say that.
Yeah, no, very true. I'm curious, what is the long-term vision for the Friends look like?
We want to play every venue that we can. We want to definitely get out of the U.S. I'm very excited to tour internationally and just take this thing as far as we can, as big rooms as we can, and hopefully get in the next 2 years and make a full-length album. But for now, our focus really is touring, for sure. We've got a lot of places we haven't played yet that we're eager to play. Yeah,
that makes sense. My last question, but it's like a bunch of rapid-fire quick answers, or quick questions.
Okay, let's
so we're going to go one by one. Dream collaborators.
The Alabama Shakes and Elton John.
Awesome. Dream venues, if you have, if there are any you haven't played.
Madison Square Garden.
Yeah, fair. Favorite lyrics that you've written?
Four-alarm firefighting, nothing but a water gun, tagging out at third base, nearly had a home run. Is from If It All Goes South. That's a new one.
Awesome. Yeah. Favorite lyrics that someone else has written?
Mama always told me not to look into the sights of the sun, but baby, that's where the fun is. From Blinded by the Light by Bruce Springsteen.
Yeah, strong choice. Who are you listening to right now? Like, who is inspiring you, and who are you listening to in terms of other musicians?
I'm listening to a lot of ladies of classic country music. I'm listening to a lot of Patsy Cline.
I mean, I think that makes sense where you are geographically, Okay, and final question. If you were a member of WMUC, which is the University of Maryland Student Radio, and you had a radio show, what would it be called, and what music would you play?
It would be called Sundays with Sam, and we would listen to my favorite, classic singer-songwriter, down-tempo stuff that we could have coffee over, and it would be a highlight of music that was only released in the 1970s. So 70s cozy coffee singer-songwriter. Yeah, Sundays with Sam.
Sunday morning, reading the paper. I can picture it now.
Yeah, totally.
Well, there you have it. Those are all the questions I have. Sammy, thank you so much for taking the time. You have a show in 3 hours probably?
Yeah, I gotta run.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you again. This was a pleasure, and have a great rest of your tour.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.